Welcome back to the Weekend Interview Show, my friends. I'm Scott Horton, and my website is weekendinterviewshow.com. My email address, scott@weekendinterviewshow.com or scott@antiwar.com. If you'd like to comment on the show. The next guest is Jude Wanniski, former Reaganite, ex-neocon, author of the daily Memo on the Margin. Welcome back to the show, Jude.
Thank you for having me back, Scott.
Oh, it's great to have you on. Now, I just talked to the editor of the book Neocon, J. Forrest Sharp, and we basically covered the entire book except your chapter, sir.
Well, okay, you want to cover my chapter?
So this is what I want to do. I think let's start off basically with the fact, well, I'll tell everybody right now what you're basically about to hear is a former Reaganite basically defends Saddam Hussein, and I believe, Mr. Wanniski, it's probably fair to say you're not a big fan of Saddam Hussein. So why is it that you feel compelled to basically make a defense in his case?
Well, there are things about Saddam Hussein that are reprehensible, and things about Saddam Hussein that are not. And we made policy in the United States, our president and our Congress, on the basis of seeing the regime in Baghdad, the Saddam Hussein regime, totally in black colors. And as a result, we now find ourselves in a really awful position with the Iraqi government unable to form, and the people on the ground in Iraq being in much worse shape now in terms of creature comforts and electricity and power and health than they were under Saddam Hussein. So I'm saying that you really have to spend serious time in due diligence in looking at all of the charges being made about Saddam Hussein. And I, early on, this goes back 12 years, began to realize that a lot of the things that we were reading about and hearing about in our press corps and from people who were supposed to know about Saddam Hussein were just totally wrong. And that's why I'm in the position I am now. A lot of my old friends now won't even talk to me anymore because I wind up, as you say, defending Saddam Hussein. I defend him on those counts where I think that the charges against him are incorrect and unreasonable and unjust. And I'm not supposed to do that, I suppose, because everybody's supposed to be putting him on trial and putting him to death even before they hear those results. But this is why I worked with John in putting together this Q&A, this chapter in his book on how we were neoconned.
Well, speaking of which, just a couple of days ago, George Bush's Blue Ribbon Weapons of Mass Destruction panel released a report that, was pretty scathing and saying they were wrong about every single thing. However, its basic conclusion, at least from the summaries that I've read, is that the intelligence about Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction was bad intelligence. Oops, we really thought we were going to find a warehouse full of sarin nerve gas, but it just didn't quite turn out that way. And so basically, I guess my first question for you when we get back from this break, sir, will be about the weapons of mass destruction and what the American government probably believed was the status of those weapons before the war. It's the Weekend Interview Show. I'm Scott Horton talking with Jude Wanniski. So a former Reaganite, supply-sider, and he's the author of a chapter of the new book Neocon called The Bogus Case Against Saddam. Jude, remembering back to 2002, didn't everyone, including the French, the Germans, and the Russians, believe that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction?
Well, absolutely, because we kept telling them that our intelligence agencies had that proof. And the proof that the intelligence that we had, we now know, looking back, and everyone acknowledges this, including the new report by this so-called Blue Ribbon Commission is that all this false information was fed to our government by people from Iraq, Iraqi exiles, who wanted to get control of the government and were willing to lie to us about what was going on over there. So that's where we are now. The Bush Blue Ribbon Commission, I believe, it really didn't advance the ball any very much. In fact, it wound up saying, well, it's not our fault in the government. The politicians aren't to blame. The people who really screwed up are the intelligence services. But the intelligence services, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, if you know as much as I do and really just read the public record, you could find out that there were plenty of those people who were telling the president all the way through 2001, 2002 that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
So who was it that was passing on the lies of these defectors to the politicians?
Well, it was always in the interest of the neocons, and that's what we've been neoconned, name of the book, because at the end of the Cold War, where we had the United States and capitalism and democracy fighting against communism and the dictatorships that aligned with themselves, then the Cold War ended. And we were now at the top of the economic pyramid. We're the only country in the world that could claim to be a superpower. Everyone else was defeated. And but the neocons said to themselves, look, we haven't finished our work. We haven't defeated all of the enemies of the United States. We defeated Moscow, we defeated Communist China, but now we have this axis of evil. And what I have been arguing, because I know all these people. I know Dick Cheney, I know Paul Wolfowitz, and Richard Pearl, and Donald Rumsfeld. I've known them on a first-name basis going back to the 1960s. That, they wound up, as President Eisenhower warned in the 1950s, part of a, quote, military-industrial complex. They're warriors. These people who are trained to be warriors. And if there's no war, what are they going to do? They might as well retire and write their memoirs. But they want to have conflict. And so they promote conflict. They provoke conflict. And this is what they did with Iraq. That's why we're at war there. There was no threat from Iraq. Saddam Hussein, in the year 2002, anyone who is in the United Nations Security Council, anyone who is observing, as I did from the outside, could see that Saddam Hussein had said, we don't have any weapons of mass destruction, and you can come and look under any rock. And he said this before we invaded. You can come and look anywhere you want.
But
you're not going to find anything because we don't have anything. And he was telling the truth.
Wasn't it a constant game of cat and mouse and playing games with the inspectors and denying access?
He never played cat and mouse with us over weapons of mass destruction. What we said he played cat and mouse with is that we had with the UNSCOM, the United Nations Security Council weapons inspectors before 1998. We knew he hadn't had no weapons of mass destruction. We knew from several years of inspections with Scott Ritter in the lead that he had nothing that could threaten the world. But that UNSCOM inspector team was trying to do was find out by with the authority they had, where was Saddam Hussein? Where was he living? Because we wanted to blow him up. We wanted to assassinate him. That's really what it was all about. The cat and mouse game was all about our having the intent of ending the regime of Saddam Hussein, and that we wanted to find out where his conventional weapons were, which he was allowed to have, and inspect those places so we could then, when the bombing began, be able to hit them. And we would also attempted to bomb places where we thought he might be hiding out so we could kill him. And it was not finding weapons of mass destruction. We knew we didn't have those. It was all, the cat and mouse game was all about how we could bring him down through assassination.
Now, you seem to be alluding a minute ago to the peace offer that was made through back channels to Richard Pearl when you said that they invited us to come and look under every rock. Were you just talking about Hans Blitz, or were you talking about the peace offer to Pearl?
No, I didn't. Those peace offers, the Richard Pearl, that's all a bunch of baloney, too. But it was an open, if you go back, Scott, and look at the period before March 2002, in those 3 months, every time You
mean 2003?
Huh? 2003.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So in 2002, it was when the war was cooking up, and then we wound up persuading all our allies, the French, the Germans, the British, that we knew they had weapons of mass destruction, but we didn't have any inspectors in there. So we passed Resolution 1441, but unanimously, 15 to nothing in the Security Council. And they said, okay, we believe you, United States. We believe your intelligence is correct, and we're going to vote to get those inspectors back in. And if they don't go back in, if Saddam won't let them back in, we're going to take action against him. And so that's where the nexus of the problem was. Okay, Saddam Hussein said, okay, come and look anywhere you want. Anywhere underneath my bed, in my shower, in my castles, in my palaces, anywhere you want. You can come and look. And we went. We went, and we sent 1,000 inspectors all over the country. And they kept looking and looking and looking. And then the inspectors said, we can't find anything. And then the Bush administration said, we know they have secret hiding places. So he said, well, tell us the secret hiding places, and we'll go and look there. And Saddam Hussein said, okay, we'll let you look at whatever secret hiding places the Bush administration said, and we gave them 100 different places. And they went and they kept coming back, and they said, there's nothing here but garbage. There's nothing here. There's spider webs where there's supposed to be nuclear weapons and biological weapons. We didn't find anything. And it was at this point that the United Nations Security Council and the French and the Germans and the Chinese and the Russians said, hey, look, it all worked. Diplomacy worked. We don't have to go to war because we have now, Saddam Hussein has been brought to his knees. There's nothing that he has. He can't threaten anyone because the best stuff, and what President Bush said and what Dick Cheney said is that we don't care. We have no evidence that they did anything. We thought they were. They're allowing us to inspect everything. We're going to still go to war. Because the reason they wanted to go to war is not because they wanted to get Saddam Hussein rid of weapons of mass destruction, is that they are imperialists. The imperialists in the sense that they want the United States in the century ahead to be an imperial power, and that Baghdad is going to be an outpost like in the old Roman Empire. It's going to be our legionnaires are going to go forward, and we're going to control the whole world with our men and women, and we're going to have wars whenever we don't like anybody who's doing something we suspect is not right. We're going to bomb them. We're going to kill them. We're going to use our military might. This is what this is all about, Scott. And this is what the book is, the neocon book, is about. And I'm saying this not as an outsider. As you pointed out at the beginning of the show, I was one of the neocons. I was shoulder to shoulder with Cheney and Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz and Pearl when I was associate editor to the Wall Street Journal. We were all fighting the Cold War to defeat, the bad guys in Moscow and Beijing, the communists who were trying to get. Now, I defected. I said, as soon as we defeated these really, truly true threats to the United States, when we defeated those, we're at peace. We don't need any more war. I'm 68, almost 69 years old. I've been, defending wars of our country all the way back to when I was a little kid. And now we don't have to have wars.
That really changed, Jude, with the first Gulf War, right? your position?
Gulf War, even the first Gulf War, you know, I have gone in and examined that whole thing, and I saw that the neocons, my old pals, even before the first Gulf War, were intent on getting control of Iraq, and getting control and building an imperial outpost in Baghdad. And that
they were intent on doing that before even the first Gulf War, you said.
Well, yeah, if you go back to the first Gulf War, and you will find out that we were supporting Saddam Hussein. We were supporting Iraq because Iraq was fighting the Iranians and the Ayatollah Khomeini.
All right, hang tight right there, Jude.
Fundamentalists.
All right, everybody, it's the Weekend Interview Show. I'm talking with Jude Wanniski. Wanniski.com is his website. We'll be right back.
Are you one of the millions who have trouble waking up every morning? Hit the snooze a few too many times? Need that morning cup of coffee to get you started? Why not put a little spice in your morning with Gano Cafe? Gano Cafe, a healthy coffee, gives you energy and vigor, increases your focus and mental clarity. Gano Cafe helps the body heal itself, strengthen the immune system, and waste elimination for detoxification. If you're a coffee drinker, you won't believe the wonderful taste of this great coffee. Ganoderma, commonly known as the reishi mushroom, has been utilized in Chinese medicine for over 2,000 years. Also known as the longevity herb, miraculous king of herbs, it's more powerful than ginseng and has much lower caffeine and acid. To get your cup of great tasting coffee, go to healthycoffeeonline.com or call 1-888-841-6055. That's 1-888-841-6055.
Introducing the world's best air purifier, the Aeronizer. The Aeronizer produces high levels of activated oxygen right from the air you're breathing. It works the way nature does. It's so powerful it kills molds and mildews as well as bacteria and viruses in the air and on the surfaces in your home. Made in the USA of the finest materials with an unconditional 2-year warranty. Call 877-605-9200 or visit the website at www.aeronair.us.
If you look back in history, you'll see that all fiat currencies have failed to maintain wealth or failed altogether. But gold has always protected its holder, a true asset usable to anyone around the globe. As the value of your Federal Reserve note continues to depreciate, gold will be your only insurance. To find out more information on how to protect your wealth, call Republic Trading at 1-800-691-7898. That's 1-800-691-7898.
Want to look good and feel great? Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Well, there are things you can do and natural products available that are strong and safer than harsh synthetics. Rediscover ancient secrets with therapeutic grade A essential oils. The molecular structure of essential oils is highly oxygenating in nature, increasing vitality and energy to the body. Our essential oils and supplements are all natural and absolutely pure to help you discover optimal health, essential nutrition, emotional well-being, and effective weight management. Whether using our products or looking for a home-based business, you'll be glad you contacted us by calling 1-800-993-OILS. Therapeutic-grade essential oils are emerging as the missing link to modern medicine. That's 1-800-993-6457. You can also visit our website at www.naturesoils.org. That's www.naturesoils.org.
Back to the Weekend Interview Show. I'm the guy with the HL Mencken bumper sticker, and I'm interviewing Jude Wanniski. His website is Wanniski.com, WANNISKI.com, or just Google for the memo on the margin. So before the break, Jude, you were talking about how Iraq was our ally during the 1980s and how the neoconservatives already at that point wanted to turn Iraq into basically an outpost of American empire. So how is it that Iraq went from being an ally of the United States to being our enemy?
Well, the Iran-Iraq war, of course, broke out back in the last part of 1979, early part of 1980, when Saddam Hussein was threatened with the Islamic fundamentalists and the Ayatollah Khomeini. Remember the whole hostage crisis that occurred, how it was involved in Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan election back in 1980. But back in that period, we viewed Saddam Hussein, who had a secular government. In other words, it wasn't a religious government in Baghdad. In fact, Saddam Hussein prohibited anyone from using religion, their particular Islamic sect, from getting engaged in politics. He wanted it was a socialist government, but
Establishment clause.
It was also a secular government. And when the Iran-Iraq war broke out, the United States wound up seeing the government in Tehran, in Iran, the Ayatollah Khomeini, as the principal enemy. And so we backed Saddam Hussein. In fact, we supplied him with quote, instruments of war. Donald Rumsfeld, our Secretary of Defense, was back then flown out to Baghdad, met with Saddam Hussein, and assured him of support. We wound up opening up diplomatic negotiations with the Iraqis, and it was our intent to have Iraq defeat the Iranians, which was 3 times its size. I mean, 20 million people in Iraq, 60 million people in Iran, but, one of the weird things that went on in that period is that the Israelis, our allies, they supported the Iranians. And it was there was one point where Henry Kissinger said, well, look, we're supporting one side, and the Israelis are supporting the other side, and essentially we're hoping they kill each other off. That's what was going on. It was part of the grand chess game going on in Washington with the Iran-Iraq war. And there were, 1 million people killed in that process. But at the end of it, we were shocked in Washington because we always thought that the Iranians would win because they had 3 times the resources, 3 times the manpower. We never thought they would be able to, that the Iraqis would defeat them. So when the Iraqis won the Iran-Iraq war in the fall of 1988, then the process of demonizing Saddam Hussein began, where they said, oh, well, the reason he won the war is because he gassed his own people. He committed genocide. He did poison gas against people. And all of that is nonsense. It's nonsense. Even, how do you know, Jude, when it's, how can you say it's nonsense? I say, well, you look at the CIA records posted on the CIA website, CIA.org or .gov. It's CIA.gov. Their national intelligence estimate of October 2002, and they essentially said, hey, all this stuff didn't happen. But we kept, the press corps kept pushing it, and politicians kept pushing it, and our alliances with the Israelis, they kept pushing it because the Israelis they didn't relish the idea of Iraq winning the war against Iran.
But Jude, hang on a second. Why?
Sure.
Doesn't it make like a simpler, more plausible explanation for our government saying that Saddam didn't gas the Kurds? Wouldn't that just be because of their embarrassment that they were financing him and helping him during that time? And that now, with their national intelligence estimate, they're just trying to cover up their own complicity in gassing the Kurds?
Well, if you would have believed that, but you would really then have to go in and say, why is the CIA even in the year 2002? We're not talking about 1988. We're talking about 2002. Why is the CIA saying that the people who died in the town of, quote, Halabja, which is on the Iraqi-Iranian border near the end of the war between Iran and Iraq, where all of our newspapers keep reporting that Saddam Hussein gassed the Kurds and 5,000 Iraqi Kurds were killed at the hands of Saddam Hussein. Go back and look at the report. You can go that year right now. You can check in CIA.gov for their national security, and they will say, how many people were killed at Halabja? And they'll say, hundreds. Hundreds, not 5,000. And they will also, the point is that there was a war going on between Iran and Iraq, and that this town was contested, and that gas was being thrown back and forth between the Iranians and the Iraqis. So there's no genocide. Genocide is what really gets people excited. The idea of genocide says Saddam is a Hitler. He's killing people with poison gas. But if we see what I believe 100%, 110%, that there was no, quote, conscious gassing by the Iraqi army of their own Iraqi Kurds.
I'm Scott, and this is the Weekend Interview Show. I'm talking with Jude Wanniski, Mr. Supply Side Economics himself, author of the Memo on the Margin, former Reaganite, ex-neocon, and he's on the show today basically to defend Saddam Hussein. Now, Jude, we're talking about Halabja. I believe from reading some things that you wrote in the past that there's some dispute over the type of gas that was used, whether it was a nerve agent or a blood agent. Can you go into that a little bit, please?
Well, this is after the Iran-Iraq war ended in August of 1988, our intelligence agents at the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency and the other outfits that we have, we spend $30-40 billion a year on our intelligence community. They did a huge seminar in Washington to try and figure out how come Saddam Hussein and the Iraqis beat the Iranians. Because they said, we have to then understand how they could win, because if there's going to be a war that we're going to have with the Iraqis, we want to know what it is that made them succeed against these big odds. And as a result of all of those discussions and seminars, they came out with a report in 1990 that said that at Halabja, it was not a report on Halabja, it was a big, long report on the Iran-Iraq war, but there was a chapter on it which had several pages and said what happened at Halabja was that the Iranians and the Iraqis clashed, their military clashed, and that gas was used by both sides, and that the number of people who were killed were not several thousand, but several hundred, and that the people who died of a blood agent, which would be a cyanide-based gas, and not a nerve agent, which would be mustard gas. And we knew that our intelligence agency reported, you could get that report yourself. And they said, we knew that the Iraqis, Saddam Hussein's regime, didn't have a blood agent. They had mustard gas. And that the people who died, we could see from all of the investigations and the photographs, that they were blue in the extremities. In other words, their arms and their legs and their face, they were blue. And that meant that they were killed by a blood agent, which is cyanide-based, and that we knew that the Iraqis didn't have a blood agent, and we knew the Iranians did. So that was the conclusion. I mean, case seems to be closed.
But wasn't Halabja a town that was nominally allied with Iran? Why would they want to gas it?
Halabja was an Iraqi town near the border with Iran. And if during the Iran-Iraq war, this is a Kurdish town. This is in Kurdistan, and during that 8-year war, at least in the early stages, everyone assumed that the Kurds were going to fight on the side of the Iranians. But as it turned out, as the war developed, the Kurds, 85-90% of the Kurds in Kurdistan fought on the side of Saddam Hussein and the Iraqis because they were getting better treatment under the Iraqis than they were under the Iranians. But there were 10 or 15% at most of the Iraqi Kurds who decided, they thought, well, the Iranians are going to win this war because they have 3 times the power. So we will snuggle up to them. We will make, and these are the people now who are trying to form the government in Baghdad. This is, we're talking about Chalabi, we're talking about the Talabani, we're talking about the Barzinis. These are all people who the Iraqis viewed as quislings. They were people who were fighting against Iraq, and they're now trying to make a government. So
let's switch gears here into the Anfal campaign. Now, supposedly there are hundreds of thousands of victims of this genocide that took place in northern Kurdistan near the Turkish border, right?
Well, that's, it's not near the Turkish border. I mean, Turkey borders on it, but the Anfal campaign was something that was that came out of the blue in the fall of 1988. When we saw, the United States saw that, holy smokes, the Iraqis are winning this war, and we didn't want them to win the war. We just want them to bleed the Iranians. And because if they're going to win the war, they're going to have this huge army, and they may be a threat to Israel. That's where it all came down to. So that we had to then promote the idea that Saddam Hussein was a Hitler, that he was a genocidal killer. And the idea was proposed by George Shultz, who was our Treasury Secretary of State back in 1988 in the Reagan administration, who all of a sudden has a press conference and says, oh, we have just learned that Saddam Hussein, our ally all these years, has committed genocide, and he has killed 80,000 Iraqi Kurds in what was supposedly the Anfal campaign. Now, if you again go back to the CIA report of 2002, and they bring up the Anfal campaign as something that was suggested, and they dismiss it. In other words, they give it the back of their hand. They say it never happened. And it never did happen.
Yeah, but what about all the hundreds of thousands of bodies they found in the mass graves?
There were no bodies ever found. There were no bodies. There were supposedly, and this is Human Rights Watch, I spent over the last 3 years more time talking to people at Human Rights Watch, and they kept I kept saying, where are the bodies? Because the reports that came out of the CIA were that if this Anfal campaign was correct, if Saddam Hussein did, murder 100,000, 80,000, whatever number of people at the end of the Iran-Iraq war, Kurds, for having sided with the Iranians, we would find the bodies. And the first reports from George Shultz, the Secretary of State, who's one of the neocons, one of the Richard Pearl Wolfowitz crowd, and Shultz said, we know it happened. We got the reports that it happened. He said this in August of '88. And the Iraqi foreign minister said, but, where are the bodies? And it shows that we can't tell you that information because it's top secret.
Well, now we own the whole country, so haven't they found mass graves? I saw Colin Powell do a big press.
Haven't found any of those bodies. The Human Rights Watch to this day says, well, at first they were telling me that they could find them, but unless we have control of the country, we can't go in and search because Saddam Hussein has control. But now, we have 2 years now, total control. We can go and look under any rock, and we haven't found anything. And so those people that I've been talking to at the Central Intelligence Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency, who've been telling me for the last several years, that none of this ever happened. That was all a great hoax by the neocons, and that it goes on and on. Saddam Hussein did not commit genocide. And now he's going to be on trial. They're going to put him on trial and for crimes against humanity, war crimes. But now they are now realizing they have no evidence because they have no bodies. They can't find anybody.
All right, Mr. Wanniski, let's kick back to 1990 and the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. Now, in the book Neocon, you kind of spend a bit of time on a meeting that took place on July the 25th, 1990, between Saddam Hussein and the American ambassador to Iraq, a woman named April Glaspie. Can you tell me what happened there?
Well, April Glaspie met with Saddam Hussein because the war. This is after the Iran-Iraq war, and Saddam Hussein and the Iraqis were complaining that the Kuwaiti government, which had benefited enormously by Iraq defeating the Ayatollah Khomeini and the fundamentalists, which were about to overthrow the Kuwaitis, that the Kuwaitis were now, the Emir of Kuwait was stealing oil from under the ground on their border with Iraq, and was also putting pressure on Iraq and Saddam Hussein to pay all their debts to Iraq, dollar debts, when it was going to Saddam Hussein put it to April Glaspie. This was economic warfare, and they were going to destroy, not with the force of arms, but with economics. They were going to bring Iraq to its knees and force it into an international bankruptcy. So what happened was that April Glaspie met with Saddam Hussein and said, well, you have all your troops now aligned along the Kuwaiti border. And he said, look, yes, but that's because they're declaring economic war on us. And as April Glaspie essentially said, look, we don't have any, this is a border dispute that you have with the Emir of Kuwait, but we hope it doesn't come out badly. We don't like war in this area. And Saddam Hussein said, look, the Emir of Kuwait is going to come next weekend to Baghdad, and we hope we can work all this out, and we don't have to have a conflict over the border. So April Glaspie said, hey, that's terrific, because I'm planning a vacation, and I'm going to go off on vacation now, and she forwarded all this information to Washington that nothing was going to happen. So what happened that weekend, here's Saddam Hussein waiting for the Emir of Kuwait to come to Baghdad to sort this stuff out, and he gets the word that the Emir of Kuwait has decided to fly off to Paris with his 300 concubines. And like thumbing his nose at Saddam Hussein, well, Saddam Hussein said, hey, no other options open. In we go to Kuwait. And that's how the invasion of Kuwait occurred.
Well, and you quote April Glaspie as saying that we don't get involved in inter-Arab affairs, that Kuwait is not associated with America, and that James Baker, at that time the Secretary of State, wanted me to emphasize this instruction to you. We don't care about Kuwait.
Well, this is, it's not that we don't care about Kuwait, it's that the State Department said we have no treaties to support an invasion, any conflict that occurs between Kuwait and Iraq over the border.
Well, but what does that mean that Mr. Baker asked me to emphasize this to you? I mean, that sounds a lot like a green light for whatever you want to do.
Well, this is why they talk about the green light that April Glaspie gave to Saddam Hussein, saying, look, you know, if push comes to shove, you know, and we have no serious stake in this, you know, you have to work this out either diplomatically or whatever you do. Now, as soon as Saddam Hussein went into Kuwait, I mean, the next day, the United Nations met and said they passed a resolution saying Saddam Hussein should work this thing out diplomatically with Emir of Kuwait. And that's what Saddam Hussein said. We've been trying to do that all along. But the Emir of Kuwait had the assurances from the Pentagon In other words, our government was giving two different signals. Our State Department was telling Saddam Hussein that we don't have any dog in this fight, and we have no treaties, and the Pentagon, which was then, Dick Cheney was the Secretary of Defense, was essentially telling the Emir of Kuwait, if they invade you, we will back you up. We will come in and defend you. So, that's how that kind of nonsense occurs. And we wound up having the 1990 war and all that flowed from it.
Well, now, hold up there, because part of having that war wasn't just the liberation of Kuwait, it was defending Saudi Arabia, because the Iraqi army, after conquering Kuwait, all lined up on the Saudi border and were prepared to invade and take over the whole peninsula and all its oil resources, right?
That's all baloney, too. It's all part of the propaganda that came out of our own government, Scott, because there was never... Here you had the story, and this is why I supported the 1990 Gulf War, because at first I thought, hey, what's going on here? Saddam Hussein is going into Kuwait, and none of the other Arab countries in the region are complaining. The Egyptians weren't complaining. The Saudis weren't complaining. In fact, in retrospect, we find that they all, historically, we now know by the record, that they all thought that Saddam Hussein had a point, and that the Emir of Kuwait was a bad guy. When I saw this was going on from a distance, I flew to Washington from my offices in Morristown, New Jersey, and I ran into Jean Kirkpatrick, who had been our UN ambassador, and she was skeptical, too, about what the heck's going on here. This Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, and we went down to the Saudi embassy, and we had a briefing, a private briefing by Prince Bandar, who is still the Saudi ambassador to the United States, and he told us that the reason that they were supporting, Saudi Arabia was supporting the United States is that they had intelligence showing that Saddam Hussein was not only trying to make his point with Kuwait, the Kuwait government, was also planning to move into Saudi Arabia. Now, that was it all turns out to be baloney in retrospect, because King Fahd of Saudi Arabia, if you look back, finds that just as the Emir of Kuwait was telling Saddam Hussein, who couldn't pay his bills to the international banks, we don't care, you can't pay your bills, even though you defended our interests against the Ayatollah Khomeini, we want our money. King Fahd of Saudi Arabia had said, hey, look, you have $8 billion you owe us, we're going to waive that. You don't owe us anything anymore. Why would Saddam Hussein, when King Fahd says you don't have to pay us, decide he's going to go after King Fahd?
Oh, well, because he's so damn insane, and you're not supposed to try to ascribe rationality to his purposes. All right, it's the Weekend Interview Show. I'm talking with Jude Wanniski. Hang on right there, Jude. Music's already playing. So we'll get back and talk about the satellite pictures and the Iraqi army lined up at the Saudi border, supposedly. It's the Weekend Interview Show. We'll be right back.
Don't take your guns to town, son. Leave your guns at home, Bill. Don't take your guns to town.
All right, welcome back to the Weekend Interview Show. We're wrapping up with Jude Wanniski. His website is wanniski.com, Wanniski, and he's the author of a chapter in a new book called Neocon, and his chapter is called The Bogus Case Against Saddam. Now, we've only got about 6-7 minutes, so if we can really quickly, Jude, I want to hear from you about the satellite photos that showed Iraq about to invade Saudi Arabia, and on the incubators and the dead babies that justified the invasion of Iraq. And then quickly, if I could get you to address the meeting between Mohammed Atta and Iraqi intelligence that supposedly took place in Prague, Czechoslovakia, in the spring of 2001.
Well, you a lot to cover in 6 minutes.
Yeah, well, I know you can talk fast.
We were talking about how King Fahd, who thought Saddam Hussein was a good guy and the Emir of Kuwait was a bad guy and Saddam was justified, now he was persuaded by U.S. intelligence that Saddam Hussein was not only going to stop in Kuwait, remember, Kuwait is a very tiny, tiny little country. It's a postage stamp. And so that he was then going to move into Saudi Arabia and overthrow King Fahd, who had been his beneficiary, and that they showed him satellite photos. Now, what you're getting at, I think, is that at the time, because it was so significant, the idea that Saddam Hussein was out to conquer, like Saladin, the whole of the Middle East, and have war with everybody, that the Orlando Sentinel in Florida had a big story about how a Russian commercial a satellite company had been taking photographs of that area during that specific time, and found out that there were no Kuwaiti armed forces that were lined up along the border about to plunge into Saudi Arabia to overthrow the king.
It was a pure lie, and they used it to trick the king of Saudi Arabia into paying for the whole war, which I think is hilarious, kind of.
That's right. They tricked King Fahd into thinking that Saddam Hussein was really a bad guy out to get him, and he gave his approval then to give the United States. So that's how that occurred.
Okay, and quickly, the incubators.
Well, the incubators story occurred, I forget now at what point that was in...
It was the fall of
that's
1990.
Right. At the time of Saddam Hussein occupying Kuwait, because he went into Kuwait to make his point that the Emir of Kuwait had to negotiate with him to stop stealing from him, right, and to make him a deal over finances so he wouldn't bankrupt Iraq. And out of that, right in the middle of all of that, while Saddam Hussein was there, comes the story that the Iraqi army went into a hospital in Baghdad, and there were, a couple of hundred little kiddies in incubators, and that the Iraqi army went and pulled the plugs so all the babies died. And this happened, and the story broke, and it was reported, and the New York Times and all our media said, this is the Hitler stuff going on. And
that really is what changed.
It changed the votes of several United States senators who didn't want to go to war, and they said, my God, we better go to war.
Right, and it turned out it was all a hoax, wasn't it?
Huh?
It turns out it was all a hoax, wasn't it?
It was all a hoax, and it turned out that the lady who did this, who promoted the story, was the daughter of one of the ministers of Kuwait, and that's, how it all happened. Much of this is just a hoax.
All right. Hey, everybody, I want to strongly recommend you read the book Neocon. It'll be out in about a month and a half. In about 2 weeks, you'll be able to go to neocon.com to order it, and especially read Chapter 1 by Jude Wanniski, the bogus case against Saddam Hussein. Very interesting. Thank you very much for coming back on the show today, sir.
Thank you, Scott.
And his website, again, is Wanniski.com. Mine is weekendinterviewshow.com, and I'll see you next week.